not only the residents, but for those who work in those facilities. We are also working with the comptroller's office to make sure that those people who say that they are tax preparers are indeed tax preparers and that they're licensed and monitored. We worked with the Maryland Military Coalition supporting Maryland veterans. We're trying to reduce their property tax and their income tax. We've also worked with other groups to try to reinstore health benefits for the state of Maryland retirees. All of these bills and more we worked on. But as I said earlier, we want to focus on two bills that you'll see that two of our advocates, Dorinda Adams to my far right, and in the middle, Laurel Peltier, worked on. They will tell you what they did, how they did it, and what you can expect as a citizen, as a consumer, and as someone who cares for loved ones. We are happy to have you join us here today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't get started early so that we could address your questions. We also, and let me just repeat, under what we worked on consumer protections, and this month is Elder Abuse Awareness Month, and AARP Maryland is supporting Protect Week, and that will begin next week. And you will hear a lot about legislation that we worked on during Protect Week around fraud and scams. But today, again, we're going to focus on family caregivers and utilities, and I will start with our lead advocate, Dorinda Adams. Dorinda, happy to have you with us this morning, and tell us what you did in order to make this a success.
Tammy, thank you. It's a joy to be here with you and Laurel and to share a little bit about SB 202, which started as a tax credit bill, but it did become through the process, and I'll discuss that briefly. The official title became the Department of Aging Caregiver Expense Grant Program. And this bill had started with AARP being involved over the last 4 to 5, maybe even 6 years, trying to establish a tax credit for our family caregivers. There are over 760,000 family caregivers living in Maryland. And so we want to acknowledge that Senator Benson has taken the lead for that bill for several sessions. And so we appreciate her wisdom and ongoing support of this legislation. And as we moved through the process of starting as a tax credit, and we also did, I want to acknowledge, originally have a delegate on the House side too, Delegate Fletcher, from Prince George's County as well. I'm sorry, not Delegate Fletcher, that's her second name, it's Delegate Harrison. So, but I want to give her credit too, because it's really important to know that actually at the Maryland General Assembly, we have a lot of friends that know about family caregiving. They connect with family caregiving. So that's very important. And as the bill proceeded, one of the biggest challenges we knew, everybody seemed to be really supportive of this bill. But what we really understood was that the analysis, the fiscal analysis of this bill had concerns about what it could do, a deficit to Maryland's budget. And as we know, we are always looking at budgets, and as good stewards of public budgets, we should be looking at them. And so because there was a analysis of a potential for 25 million in lost estate revenue, the bill was struggling. But I also want to acknowledge that there were so many different organizations that were part of our advocacy on this bill that participated with their members or clients, their employees, depending on the organization itself. They helped move the needle on this bill. They were making phone calls, they were sending emails, they were on social media, And this was really important. So that kept keeping this bill alive. And then, just as we were looking at finishing for the session, the bill became amended to no longer be a tax credit, but what is now known as a expense grant program. So what that really means is that family caregivers fitting in certain criteria, and we can talk about that if needed, more specifically, but family caregivers can submit up to $2,500 in any given fiscal year for out-of-pocket expenses in caring for their family. So this is a win, even though it wasn't the tax credit, which would have been wonderful for our family caregivers. For the first time, the state of Maryland has authorized that $5 million may be included in the state's annual budget to support our family caregivers that are caring for either a family member that's over the age of 60 or caring for a family member, or the family member that's caring for the individual has a functional or developmental disability, and that family caregiver is someone over the age, I believe, 50 or 55. And then there is a third group where, and I'm blocking this, I do apologize, I'll have to look at my notes to give you the specifics. But there is, it's in concert, the way the legislation is written, it's in concert with the National Family Caregiver Support Program, which is federal legislation that's already in existence here in Maryland. So this bill was to mirror that. And that third population is really focusing on, again, if someone is 50 or 55 caring for a family member with either a functional or a developmental disability. And if I repeated that, I'm sorry.
You got it. That is a lot of, and there's also, you want to talk about the income, right?
Yes, very quickly, I will share about the income. The adjusted gross income for a single filer is 75,000 or under in any given fiscal year. And for joint filers, it's 150,000 or under. So that does provide for a lot of people to potentially access this money. And for expenses like paid respite care or paid in-home care, those are expenses that can be considered, or actual modifications to your home if it's to support the individual with family, with the caregiver needs. So I can go on, but if you...
No, you have time.
Okay.
You want to just tell us some of the what the
Coalition.
And
yeah.
we'd also be remiss if we did not mention the hundreds of advocates, the AARP advocates, what we call our armchair advocates, would weigh in with their individual legislators. They were actually emailing at least 3 or 4 times every month, telling them how important this bill was. So we can't not mention the fact that our very own membership, our advocates that we call the armchair advocates, were weighing in to make sure that this bill would pass.
And Tammy is accurate. The partnerships, which are truly, again, to do this type of work, are so critical. And Tammy mentioned a couple of them in her opening remarks. And specifically around this bill, there was the Maryland Senior Action Network, MSCAN. We should acknowledge they are a critical partner. Caring Across Maryland is a critical partner. The DD Council, the Maryland Coalition of Military, or the Military Coalition, they were critical in all of this. The MS Society, March of Dimes or Easter Seals, as they are primarily known, are critical. Alzheimer's Association, the Maryland Commission on Caregiving. There are other organizations like Hands of Hope, which supports family caregivers. And there's also 100 Black Women of Southern Maryland. All of these groups were critical for us to be able to raise the awareness. And it is so important because I do need to say, while this is a success, a true success, the work is not done. The bill goes into effect on July 1st of this year, but that doesn't mean that the $5 million is there yet. That's the purview of the governor's budget. And so we need to continue that work to ensure that that $5 million is there. And that's ongoing. And we will be asking all of these various organizations to continue to join us in advocating for our family caregivers. So I think that for a moment, I should wrap up.
While the other important information here is that while the program is effective July 1st, and the money is discretionary, so we'll be working, we'll be sending letters and information to the governor's office, trying to get that $5 million into the Department of Aging's budget. The Department of Aging will be implementing this program through the Department of Aging.
Yes.
And there will be some startup time that needs to be allotted for them to do that. So we are hoping that we will meet with them. I know that I have a call with their legislative liaison in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see where they are in the progress. But it's not like we turn the lights on July 1st, and you can just go apply for your grant and it's there. There's going to be some baby steps in there, and so we'll ask you to be patient, but to monitor and to make sure that they are working on it.
Yes.
So, so that's in the nutshell, but what happens with legislation is that you have to plant the seed a couple of times, and then you have to build upon that. And what was unique about this, and unique about Dorinda coming over and being a volunteer advocate, is that she had worked in her previous life with the Maryland Department of Human Services, and she staffed the Maryland Commission on Aging. She and I, back a few years ago, actually established the Maryland Commission on Aging along with our Senator Dolores Kelly, who worked on that issue as well. But she brought together this coalition of people, and you'll hear that same kind of process resonate over all of our legislative wins, is that we worked within coalitions because larger voices get larger attention. And again, like I say, and I've copied this from a former Speaker of the House, all politics is local. So the more people who weigh in on an issue, who have relationship building, and that's what we do here at AARP. We try to develop our advocacy core so that they develop individual personal relationships with the people that represent them, or the people that make decisions about who represent them. And that makes us more successful. That gives us some extra step. We don't go to fundraisers. We don't support candidates. We're a nonpartisan, bipartisan organization. We don't endorse candidates. We work with them on the issues that are important to our membership. And we hope that we can translate our relationship with that legislator, with the executive branch, because we have a very large membership in Maryland who wants to make sure things are there. They have resources, services that they can depend on as they age in place. And so we thank Dorinda because we know that caregiving is a very important topic. We will be focusing on caregiving from now until the end of the year and then into next year, during this presidential campaign, the Maryland Senate campaign, congressional campaigns. And these are all questions that you should be asking your elected representatives, where they are with family caregiving, because it is an issue that affects almost everyone. And with that, we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, and we'll come back if anybody has questions for Dorinda at the end after Laurel Peltier, who is from Baltimore County. Laurel joined our team several years ago. Actually, she brought the issue that she's going to talk to you about, retail energy supply, to my attention about 7 years.
Yeah.
Is it 7 years?
We're
6
in our
years,
sixth
sixth
year.
year. And I was like, when she first started talking to me about this, I think I knew about it peripherally, but I didn't understand what was happening in the community. And so Laurel's going to give you an overview of what was happening in the community, what the remedies were that we could work on, and what is going to be done in the future. Laurel, take it away.
Thank you, Tammy and Dorinda, and it's nice to see everybody, sort of virtually. I'm Laurel Peltier, and I brought a topic to AARP that fell under the utilities umbrella. So every single building in our state has to hook up to our regulated utilities for our electricity and gas. And utilities is a big national policy as well, having affordable utilities. It's extremely hard to age in place, be on a fixed income if your utility bills, your home energy, you could call, are just going up and up and up. So this topic was resonated right in the middle of AARP's bucket. And other AARP states had been working on it, but what we're talking about for SB1, which did pass and get the governor's signature, is a bill about retail energy. It's also called retail choice. And for many of you, you might recognize those sales guys in big box stores, or sales ladies too, that are like, hey, switch your Pepco or BG or Delmarva or Smecco or Potomac Edison bill, and you're gonna save, you're gonna get green energy. It's been in our state for 20 years, actively for 14. But many people in our state know about this topic because they come to their front door all the time, especially in the warmer weather and especially in low-income zip codes. That is primarily the sales channel that retail energy suppliers who are competing for your energy business with our regulated utilities. But what was intended to be a bill in 1999 to really help consumers and commercial users didn't pan out at all for residential users. And the biggest challenge that we faced is that this was a bill that was hidden, and the issue is very hidden. It happened on 500, 600, 700,000 utility bills, but there was no reporting. Utilities aren't exactly sexy. So people were hearing stories. Like a few people called into AARP and said, something's wrong with my utility bill, but I was reporting out in Baltimore City and realized, wait, this is much bigger than I thought, because I was seeing these bills. I was seeing somebody on a third-party supplier on a variable rate paying sometimes $200 to $1,000 more a year. And I was seeing the harm it could cause because many people, especially in low-income areas, were getting termination notices and getting their power cut off. So our job at AARP was, one, for me to learn the system, which AARP is brilliant at teaching green people like me, green volunteers, how the system works. But really, the word you heard over and over is partnership. And bills like Senate Bill 1 never happen without a partnership, without a coalition. And what I don't think many people know, and I certainly didn't know before I started this, is years of work. It takes a long time for, just like Tammy said, for the concept to be known, for the seed to be planted. And it's really across a large group of people. It's across legislators, it's across finding all the coalition, the fuel funds, the energy advocates. But utilities doesn't have a large coalition. Probably the biggest player in utilities is AARP Maryland. So we started
And champion legislators.
Okay, then I get to the stars aligned for SB1. We were unbelievably lucky. Many, many things happened. First of all, before I get to the champion legislators, we had been out there for years, and I am laughing because we had bringing the data. There was no data. And we spent years building the data, building the reporting, working with Public Service Commission, Office of People's Counsel, AG's office. We have been taking this presentation for a solid couple years. We had one win in 2021, which was to put a price cap for households getting energy assistance. And that's also really set the foundation. But the big bill was helping everybody that's watching this, every single person on it that has a utility bill is really making sure that this industry could not charge these insane rates. So what had happened is by the time we got to 2024, we really had everyone on our side. We were all working together. We talked to the AG's office, the Public Service Commission was there. They're the regulators, Office of People's Counsel. But where we really hit the home run is with the champion legislators. On the Senate side, it was Malcolm Augustine. He's pro tem, which means he's pretty much second in the Senate. He is the lead on utilities in a very difficult and very important committee called EEE, Education, Environment, and Energy. Then we have Delegate Brian Crosby, who's vice chair over at Economic Matters. And these two legislators, with this support that we had built, they were resolute. They wanted this fixed. Everybody wanted this fixed. They wanted retail choice to remain in the state, but they wanted it to be essentially fixed from A to Z. So it was, and it was a crazy couple months because this industry works in 14 states, is very powerful, very large, and was telling a completely different story than what we were showing. But it worked. And over the 3 months, what you will get as a benefit is starting in January 1st, 2025, this industry will have rate regulations, we'll have green power regulations, we'll have new licensing, the sales folks will be completely trained, the PSC, I mean, I could go on and on and on. But here's a really neat regulation, especially for people with seniors in the house. If you live in an area that's consistently hit with salespeople and you do caregiving for somebody who might have, who is, getting older and is susceptible to a really good sales pitch and a gift card, a caregiver can actually call into the regulated utility or the customer and just say, I would like my utility account to remain on regulated supply. I can't participate in this. I don't know enough. And that's something new that came out of this bill. So SB1 was signed by the governor. If you were here in Maryland, it had 29 lobbyists. You could not miss this bill. And what you can expect is to be able to participate in retail choice. And our advice, as it's been for the last really 6 years, is please check your utility bills. Please get your utility bill on paper. Understand your usage, know your regulated rates. And if you see any other name on there, let's say you're in the BG&E territory. If you see a supplier and the circles on the first page, it's another energy name, like a Tomorrow or a Direct Energy. And you're like, how'd that get on there? Call us, because we have volunteers that help. But SB1 made it, and it was because of partnerships.
Tell our listeners and our viewers, tell them exactly what would happen. So, talk to them about the entry of the sales rep and then the teaser and then what happens after that and what was happening after that initial reduced rate, or and sometimes it was just the same as what the BGE or the Pepcos. Tell us.
That's
give us
such a
whole
good question,
situation.
because the product is so tricky, and it's the same product. About 10 million families are on this right now across the country. But it's like a lot of consumer products where it looks like one thing, but when you see it played out in reality, it's very different. So the industry comes in with a teaser rate and often a gift card, and they will say, you're going to save on your electricity. And most people actually aren't seeing these big contracts, and we're talking ironclad Fortune 500, 5-page contracts in 4-point font. What that product really is they're able to sell low and then bill high later, because people aren't catching that it's going to flip to a variable rate if you don't stay on top of this product. And real data showed that across all states, about 75% of people would never reshop. So a lot of the people we helped were literally looking at us saying, I don't even remember when I signed up for this. If you didn't reshop, you got switched to variable rates, which were legal, that had no max, which was legal. That we had a person who paid $17,000 over 2.5 years under the green power issue. I mean, this was actually really, really, really causing heartache for a lot of people. And many people, sadly, didn't even know they were flipped. There was a group of salespeople, because they were commission-based, so that can't happen anymore in Maryland. They have to be an hourly employee. There were many, many people who were completely unaware that they were on this and didn't even know their rights as a resident, that you can file a complaint. So the product itself was extremely tricky, and it was almost bizarre that we expected people to understand it. And so again, the story, we would come in and talk about the story, and for a few years, people were like, huh, like, are you guys a little crazy? Because people just weren't aware about it. And I still think, I said, on January 1st, there's probably going to be 100,000 families who would be paying their utility bills, and they'll say, I'm not really sure why, but our BG&E bill is like $100 less this month, because they just aren't aware that they're on these products, but the rates will get reduced. So it was crazy, but it was fun.
So Laurel, this was a 28-page bill or somewhere around that,
Right.
And there's a lot of other things in there that talk about what the industry can and can't do. One of the things that made Maryland very attractive to this industry was something that the industry calls purchase of receivables. And tell our viewers what purchase of receivables means and why it was so lucrative for the industry, and why having it in this bill, it will help.
So this is on my journey learning about this. I kept asking, I'm confused that if, say, a low income account, and I work out in the field 2 hours a week. So if I'm helping somebody who is $1,500 behind on their bill, and 1,000 of this is from these overpayments, and they're not paying their bill, how is this industry making money? So finally, someone says to me, do you know what purchase of receivables is? Of course I didn't. No one really did. And what it is it was a regulation done over at the PSC side, not in Annapolis. And it said that the utilities, BG&E and Pepco, they would basically buy up the charges that were due for the supplier. So regardless of whether the consumer on that supplier paid their bill or not, they got paid, the supplier got paid. And the utilities ended up doing all the back end work, the billing, the collections, the terminations, all the work that goes into collecting a debt. And what happened is, what we argued is that with no price regulations, so you can charge whatever you want, seriously, with a lot of people who don't understand their utility bills, most people get them on e-billing, and we say, why are you doing that? You need to look at your bills. And they're going to get paid. This industry was going to get paid the same month that bill was cut. It was printed by the regulated utility. Because here's one thing you may not remember, is that you get your BG&E bill and the supplier's charges were embedded in there. So many people weren't seeing it. That just was a recipe for overcharging, because you're going to get paid. And a lot of suppliers flooded into Maryland. And this happens in many, many states. So that is a big part of this, a quiet part of this law, is that purchase of receivables is now eliminated, and a supplier will have to own their own debt. So if they have clients who aren't paying their bills, those suppliers won't get paid.
So we have our work cut out for us. We know that Laura will be working with the Public Service Commission and having a presence there, as well as she has great relationships with the Office of the People's Counsel and the Office of the Attorney General, and all of us together will be making sure that your utility bills stay within a reasonable, affordable, reliable way that people can age in place and stay in their lifelong homes. So we really, really appreciate everything that Dorinda and Laurel has done. And Laurel didn't talk to you as much about the coalition that she built, but she has something called Energy Advocates, that if anyone is interested in joining, she could always use another hand. Dorinda has a coalition of caregivers, and she has some ideas for 2025 to carry on sort of the advocacy, the lobbying efforts to make sure that caregivers remain at the forefront of our lawmakers and our appointed officials. Laurel has energy advocates. She works with people from all over the country. And we have assets and resources all over the country as well. So with that, we have had a very successful year. We know that maybe there are some questions that were put in the chat. And so Eleanor Nancaro, who organized this event, we thank her for all of her hard work. She has some questions for our team.
So we do have some questions in the chat. Philip would like to know what qualifies you as a caregiver to receive benefits?
You have to be a family caregiver or an informal caregiver, meaning you're not receiving any compensation for that care. And that includes if you were being reimbursed through insurance or a public program. But any other expenses as a non-paid caregiver would be considered eligible.
And Serena would like to know, she's explaining that she's caring for a family member, but not in her home. Would she be included in this? And if her income is more than a certain amount, does that mean she would not be eligible?
Yes, again, the qualifying amount is 75,000 or under for a single filer and 150,000 for joint filers in any given tax year. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry. I know there was two.
Do they have
parts.
to live together?
Oh, did they have to live together? No, they do not have to live together, but they have to be able to demonstrate a relationship as family, which is specified.
She also wanted to know, is there somewhere where she can access a list of agencies who supported the bill?
Yes, that is actually on the Maryland General Assembly website.
Senate Bill 202.
Yes.
And you'll go down to the witness list.
Mhm.
And she can even watch all the live testimony, and most of the written testimony will be there.
Yeah. Yes, it's there.
Has AARP taken on the issue of medical assistance in dying? Such as the bill in this Maryland's General Assembly?
We did not.
The gentleman would like to know, he retired, from 30 years of employment to care for his, 48-year-old son that had a stroke. Would he qualify for the program, or is there an hourly wage? He may need to go back to work.
This expense grant is not going to be considered an hourly wage. If he is over the age of, I believe it's 55, and he's caring for his 48-year-old son, he could qualify for the expenses up to $2,500 annually.
And he could also look for
Or other supports.
other
yeah.
supports through the Department of Aging and or the Department of Human Services. They both have caregiver programs.
Yeah.
He also was curious if there are any focus groups, for caregivers, in Baltimore County.
There are definitely support groups. I would encourage him to look at the Maryland Commission on Caregiving's page and if he Googles Maryland Commission on Caregiving, that'll take him to that page. It's within the Department of Human Services. They house that commission. And that commission is the formal entity that looks at family caregiving issues across the lifespan. So I would start from there, and then if he has, additional questions, then perhaps getting back to us.
And I would also say that each county Like I was reading yesterday that at, the Maryland Department of Aging, their caregiver program, and I don't think that they necessarily have a lot of age requirements. If you're a caregiver, you're kind of welcome to their support group. They have in person, they're getting ready to go, they were all virtual, now they're getting ready to go to in person. But so contact your local government to see what caregiver programs they have as well.
And one more question for you, Dorinda. Can, this individual look up a list of examples of what qualifies as an expense, a caregiving?
Yes, it's in the statute itself, and it's things that like paying for respite care or actual ongoing, hiring, like, for example, a certified nursing assistants in, their home. It's, expenses to modify the home to ensure that the individual needing care can remain in the home. Other out-of-pocket expenses that, would be considered like over-the-counter, medications, things that are, specialized transportation. It can't just be general transportation, but if you need to hire like a medical transport service to get your family member to, a medical appointment, that would be an example.
And medical specialty, needs like maybe canes or
Mhm.
walkers, that kind of thing, or if you have to do
Yeah.
something with modify your tub.
And two questions for Laurel. The first is, what is a phone number to call if someone is having utility issues for their 85-year-old mother?
Okay, first, I have to say thank you to everybody because a lot of you emailed in and called, and it really made a big difference, like thousands, so. Okay, if you're having a utility issue, my first recommendation is to obviously call your regulated utility. And be very specific about what your question is and have your bill in front of you. And while that all sounds really obvious, a lot of people don't do that. So try to have your actual bill in front of you. And then if you're having an issue with the third-party supplier, we have a volunteer line. It's texting only at 443-595-7844. I'll say it again, 443-595-7844. That's a texting line. And we help people just kind of manage what to do when they do find a third-party supplier. Trying to think, if you have an energy assistance question, which is also a utility question, like let's say you have a termination notice and you're income eligible, know that in the state of Maryland, you can receive grants if you're income eligible from Office of Home Energy Programs to get grants to make your utility bill more affordable. And that happens every year. A lot of people don't know you can reapply every single year. And the fiscal year of our state starts on July 1st.
And for older people, it's gotten easier.
It's, yes,
They don't
yes.
have to file the whole paperwork, just the paper, right?
Yes, so this is neat, this is something that AARP and Cancer Support Foundation worked on, is that if you're over 60 and you do energy assistance every year, you'll get a redetermination letter so that you can actually sign it, say everything's the same. So first hit your utility and ask them all kinds of questions, the same exact question. Who else do we need to call? If you have a third-party supplier or even an energy assistance, use that text line. And know that your local DSS office is generally the place that you go for energy assistance. So if you're behind on that utility bill, do something now. Don't wait for a power cutoff. But that's the chain of command to get your utility issues fixed.
And Leslie says that she gets questions about whether there are ways of saving costs when having to replace HVAC or hot water heaters or other appliances. Does AARP have any programs on what tax refunds, rebates, or other savings are available? She heard there are funds available under the federal IRA that can provide tax refunds.
We know that there is a home, there's a bunch of programs throughout the state that actually help low-income people what they call weatherization of the home. And most of those, they're not run out of AARP, but they're like run out of the Department of Housing. and or they're like the energy assistance program, but there are programs like in Baltimore City. What's the name of the program that,
Well, so,
Delegate Stein runs?
right, so like Civic Works, but
Civic Works.
every single person who pays a utility bill is funding our state's energy efficiency program, and it's called Empower Maryland. And you definitely have to just write Empower Maryland down. It's run through your regulated utility.
EMPOWER.
Exactly.
You'll see it on your bill.
Empower Maryland. And that is your first line of defense in really understanding all the, I mean, very rich rebates from heating, insulation, weatherization, heat pumps, all that. So that's kind of your state run stuff. And that's separate, it's done separately, of course, for low income. That's under DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development. But those programs are, if you use those programs and you apply, you will get rebates. And it works quite well. The IRA stuff, the Inflation Reduction Act that you're asking about is, it's amazing you're informed. It's super smart on your part. And I would say Google is your best friend there. It is just now being launched from the feds to the states. And Maryland Energy Administration, it's called MEA, it's always all these acronyms. They are taking the IRA money and it all kind of layers together. But I will tell you that a really, really great organization, another nonprofit, is called Rewiring America. And they just have super consumer friendly ways to learn about all of these electrification and this IRA money. So it does take a little bit of homework. It's an interesting idea about AARP. I know we're going to start sending out some stuff on energy assistance, but it's kind of, you kind of have to do it on your own. But once you find the Empower Maryland sites, you're going to see all the information. And persistence pays, and it pays a lot. I love this stuff.
I think that's it for
Energy.
the questions.
No, well, thank you. Well, I'd like to say congratulations to our volunteer advocacy team, the leaders who made this happen. This is been a great legislative session. As I said earlier, we've recorded over 30 wins, so there is a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss. You can visit our website at aarp.org/MD to look at all the other legislation that we supported. Again, we work on a lot of consumer protection. We worked on extending the sunset provision on a senior drug program. And so there's a ton of bills, but we had worked so long and fought so hard on these two bills that we thought we would bring those two to you today. And that if you had questions or comments, or if you want to join our advocacy team, please go to aarp.org/MD. The work is not done. We have to be vigilant. You know, Laurel said how we got involved with this third-party supplier was a older woman from Prince George's County called me, and she didn't want the third party or the retail energy supplier anymore. And they told her she'd have to pay $600 to get out of the contract. So there are some things that aren't necessarily true or that that can happen. And so if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to call us. Thank you again for joining us at AARP Maryland's virtual legislative briefing. Do you all have anything that any final comments?
I just want to say, don't ever hesitate to reach out. People truly want to support other people. And that's one of the biggest takeaways. I've worked in, as Tammy mentioned, in the legislative arena for 22 plus years. And I just was blown away this past session by how many members of our Maryland General Assembly that actually want to do the right thing to support all of us, but in particular, as I worked on family caregivers. So don't hesitate to reach out. That's really important. And thanks for all you have done to make this legislative session success for 2024.
Tammy, I have to thank you. I've formally thanked you and the whole AARP team. I don't think anybody understands how much behind the scenes work happens, and And some of it is pretty tough, and it's really nice to have the support, and it's so much fun. And I sort of agree, the other day I was at a party and someone was doing that, oh, everyone in government, and I said, time out, that's just simply not true. There's so many excellent legislators who are here to do the right thing in a very tough system, and there's so many people that do help people. But if you don't, like you said, reach out, if you don't ask, don't get, you've got people you elected, you have AARP. I mean, all the time I get leads that came in through email and a call. And if I can't figure it out, it's obvious we know a lot of people, then we'll get the answer. So it's a partnership and it works.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank our team. You can't see them, but we have a production crew here that is Savannah, Eleanor Valley, and Nancy Carr, our comms director. And so we thank all of them. Thank you again for joining us at AARP's virtual legislative briefing. If you'd like to learn more about our upcoming events, and like I said, to learn more about some of the consumer protection work that we did during the session, please go to aarp.org/MD today. Thank you, and look for us.